As Republicans rally around their candidate for the fourth night of the RNC, a very different reality is playing out for the Democratic Party right now, as President Biden faces growing pressure to withdraw from the race. NBC News is reporting that there is now a, quote, palpable sense that the ground has shifted from under Biden, even among some of the president's most defiant internal backers who now believe the writing is on the wall. One person close to the president saying bluntly, we're close to the end. The New York Times adds that several people close to Biden are saying today that they believe he has begun to accept the idea that he may not be able to win in November and may have to drop out of the race. It all comes after numerous reports that big names in the party are pressuring Biden to step aside. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer reportedly told Biden on Saturday that it would be best if he stepped out. CNN is reporting that former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told the president that polls show he cannot win. And according to the Washington Post, even former President Barack Obama has told allies in recent days that his former VP's path to victory has greatly diminished. And he thinks the president needs to seriously consider the viability of his candidacy. A source close to President Biden is aggressively pushing back on all of this, telling NBC News, quote, how did all of this work out for everyone in 2016? Perhaps we should learn a few lessons from 2016. One of them is polls are BS. Just ask Secretary Clinton. And two, maybe, just maybe, Joe Biden is more in touch with actual Americans than Obama, Pelosi, Schumer. Meow. Joining me now is former Democratic Senator from Missouri and MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill. Claire, it is so great to see you. Now, I know that Jen had a question for you, and I want to just throw it to you because you guys are having a conversation that I want to bring to the people.
Yeah, I think a really important part of this is senators and what the Senate thinks and these campaigns and what they think. It's not the only factor. I think it's important just to restate. We know where the momentum is going in Congress, where Democratic leaders, Democratic members, they clearly are moving in the direction of wanting the president to step out as the nominee. We don't know that President Biden has made a decision to do that, and we don't know when he will do that, if he will do that, despite what they want. That being said, on these campaigns, Claire, you've won a lot of tough races in a tough state. What are they looking at? What data are they looking at? What are the discussions on these campaign teams? Help us understand, or help our viewers understand, what factors? They may love Joe Biden, but they're thinking about winning. So what are those conversations?
So here's what. First, let me push back a little bit on that person close to Biden. Chuck Schumer isn't going to Joe Biden, to President Biden.
You mean the last quote, Joy?
Yeah, where they said, maybe Joe Biden knows the voters better than Chuck Schumer and blah, blah, blah. Chuck Schumer is not going there as Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer is going to President Biden as the leader of the Democratic Party in the United States Senate, which is in the majority by a fingernail. Mm-hmm. This is a really tough map for Senate Democrats, the toughest in many, many years. And so all of these senators that are in these very tough states, what they did is they waited after the debate to give space and grace, hoping that maybe nothing else would be necessary. Clearly, that was not going to be the case. So they waited most of these campaigns. In fact, I would bet every single one of them probably waited, as you know, Jen, maybe 7 to 10 days to start the polling, to let the soak in what had happened, and then they went in the field. And it was after all those came back from the field that Schumer had the data, and he had his caucus to represent. And I don't think the meeting with the Biden campaign staff, with the Democratic senators, went well last week. I don't think I'm not saying it was unanimous, but it was very clear, I think, to the people that were representing Biden in that meeting with the Democratic senators that they didn't have a clear answer as to how he now overcame this deficit. What was he going to do, and what could he do to overcome it? So Chuck went and talked to him, and so did Nancy Pelosi, and so did Hakeem Jeffries. And these aren't elite people these are people who represent hundreds of people who've run for office. They represent millions of voters in our party. They have a job to do here. They are supposed to do this. So they're only doing what they think is in the best interest of the values that we all share, including Joe Biden.
Can I ask you this question? Because I've talked to some members today as well, and these are African-American members who are getting tremendous pressure. I talked to a member who had, sort of political pollster types and others that are representing people who want President Biden to step aside, really pressuring them and trying to convince black members that they must get on board because, as you know, as everybody here knows, the CBC has not been on board at all. And the feeling that they were getting is that the pressure is not just for President Biden to step aside, but that it was coming with a side of we don't want Kamala Harris. And that this was presented. I spoke to a couple of members who were on a Zoom they were being told that Kamala Harris's numbers are similar to Biden and that the pressure is twofold, and that this is coming from multiple members that I have spoken with off the record about the fact that the pressure they're getting is not just about President Biden, it's also about Kamala Harris.
I have not spoken to a senator who has said anything
Not
other.
from senators, though.
No, what I'm saying is my sources are, I'm telling you, I'll say it's Kamala. Every single one of them. I don't know where.
Are you surprised that no one is? This is what surprises me, Claire. It's just the way that you're so definitive. Why do you think that the people that are going, as you said, to President Biden and then are allowing their names to leak, are not allowing that to leak? Because the fact that so many members that I'm talking to are of the very firm belief that to the point where 1,400 African-American civil rights and political and get out the vote leaders literally put out a letter today because they don't feel confident that this is not an anti-Harris campaign.
I just want to add to what Claire said. I also haven't spoken to anyone who doesn't think it's going to be Harris.
But then why are so many members
I don't
receiving
know.
what they're saying is pressure to also set her aside as well? They're not getting that from nowhere, and they're unanimous in the ones I'm talking with.
Yeah, I can't tell you where that's coming from, Joy, but I can tell you that is not a held belief by the donors I've talked to. I've talked to a bunch of big donors. I've talked to a whole bunch of United States senators. Everyone is, in fact, I had 3 United States senators say to me today, she's ready. We're excited. This is going to be terrific.
They're not allowing that to come out? Why aren't they leaking that? Why don't they just come out and say it?
I think they're all trying to be very respectful of Joe Biden at this point. I think everybody feels a lot of pain. He's their friend.
Oh, yeah.
Many of them served with him for a long, long time. This is painful. It's painful for the Biden family. It's painful for his friends and colleagues. So I think they're not wanting to, go Kamala until Joe Biden has said it's not me.
And there's a decision process to what is fundamentally the most precarious, rare, difficult intra-party lobbying campaign in the history of presidential politics. No president has ever dropped out this late in the race. These are extraordinary times, as we all know, in different ways. And one thing I've observed, we're all talking to people. We've all been around it in different ways.
Yes, we have.
One thing I've observed is a lot of people have tried to respectfully, diplomatically, get President Biden to a place where not only does he see that he's currently on a trajectory to lose, which was already the view of the campaign going into the debate. They negotiated the earliest ever presidential debate because they thought that they were on a bad trajectory and they wanted to shake it up. Well, as you know, Claire and friends, they shook it up. There was a reaction to the debate, but not the one they'd hoped for. And so they went from a view of on a trajectory to lose to now, if you quote the allies around Barack Obama, and I'm curious as well, because we haven't hit that point, whether you think that reporting is accurate, that Barack Obama is saying it's now looking like irreversibly on that trajectory. And that's different than a random person posting online or talking at the bar. These are Barack Obama and Joe Biden know a lot about putting together winning coalitions. They've both done it. They also know what it looks like sometimes when it's too late. And so picking up on this conversational point, Claire, there's a real question over whether that process has moved Joe Biden to say he can't reverse this. And then if you care about the party and the country, what do you do? And then it's a step 2 of who can and this question of who else. What do you think about that sort of decision tree?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, call me skeptical that Barack Obama is weighing in on this.
I mean, I've always called you Senator McCaskill, and then I call you Claire when you tell me to call you Claire, but I'll call you skeptical.
Call me skeptical.
Okay.
President Obama is incredibly careful about when he talks and how he talks and who he talks to. I find it hard to believe that he's out here jawing with people saying, "Oh, I don't think he has a path to win."
So you don't buy the Washington Post story. Period.
I'm just skeptical of it, and here's why. I think that President Obama is going to be more focused on being seen as an honest counsel and sounding board for Joe Biden. And he can't be that if he's out there, as you know, everybody's been for like 2 weeks now.
Leaking their own names and seems it's something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and the other thing I would say, one of the things they polled that I forgot to mention before that I think is really important, for the people that are in these battleground states where Biden has to win, and we have Democratic Senate candidates, they are doing okay now. But when they polled, would it impact your decision to vote for Senate candidate X if they were continuing to say Joe Biden was capable of serving for another 4.5 years? And it actually polled that it was going to hurt these candidates. So they're in this horrible position. Biden is going to be in their states, every 10 minutes because he has to win, especially Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
How do those candidates handle that without losing the leads they have right now, for many of them, is within the margin of error?
Can I add an Obama thing? I mean, Claire's friends with him. I worked for him for 10 years, and I could not agree more with what Claire said for a couple of reasons. One is he holds his cards close to his chest. I think for anybody who has an Obama tracker out there, I will tell you a couple things. He doesn't care if there's news stories saying, where is he? He is a long game player, and he's looking at how he can be the unifier for whatever the final moment is. He also reads polls. He also understands where the trajectory is here. But I would be surprised if we heard from him speaking out loud before he gives a speech at the convention.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn. MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.